They say darkness is the cruelest thing that can happen to a person. They're wrong. The cruelest thing is learning to trust the dark, learning to read its textures, its temperatures, its silences, building an entire world inside it, brick by careful brick, until that world feels safe. And then discovering that the people holding the candles were never lighting your way. They were lighting the room so they could see you better, so they could watch what they were doing to you. My name is Seraphine Calloway, and I have been blind since my 7th birthday. I have never seen a sunrise. I have never seen my own face. I have never seen the expression on someone's eyes in the moment they decide to betray you, but I have felt it. And on the night this story begins, I felt it so completely, so absolutely, that I ran, barefoot, in the rain, in the dark, into a road I couldn't see, toward a future I couldn't imagine, away from the only life I had ever known. I ran straight into a stranger's carriage. And by the time the sun came up, a sun I couldn't see but could feel warming the left side of my face like a held breath finally released, the most powerful man in 6 kingdoms had pressed his lips to my hand and called me something I didn't have a word for yet. You'd think being blind would make you easier to deceive. I once believed that too. Then I learned that the people who underestimate your darkness are always the ones who never bothered to develop a light of their own. This is the story of the night I stopped surviving and started becoming someone worth fearing. Chapter 1. The fire in the east hearth spoke first. Seraphine had learned, years ago, to let rooms introduce themselves before she moved through them. Fires had personalities. This one was low and comfortable. The crackle was slow, deliberate, like an old man reading to himself in an armchair. No hurry anywhere. No crisis expected before morning. The timber was oak. She knew because oak fires smelled like the inside of old books, warm and faintly sweet. Nothing like the sharp green bite of pine or the heavy, smoky authority of birchwood. She was home then. She always had to remind herself of that, in those first soft seconds after waking. Home. Not the place she'd grown up. Not the Calloway Manor with its cold marble floors and the particular silence that rich, unhappy houses wore like a coat. This was the estate she'd been brought to 4 years ago when her father remarried, and home was perhaps too generous a word for it. But the east hearth spoke gently tonight, and the sheets beneath her fingers were warm, and for exactly the length of a long, held breath, she let herself believe that was enough. "You're doing it again." The voice came from the left side of the bed. Low, familiar, carrying that particular undertone of soft amusement that she had once, foolishly she now understood, mistaken for tenderness. Bastian, her stepbrother. She turned her face toward him. She'd learned not to turn her eyes. It unnerved people when she aimed her gaze too precisely, because they expected blindness to come with vagueness, with wandering focus, with the vacant look of someone staring at nothing. When Seraphine looked directly at you, using her other senses the way another person might use sight, it made people uncomfortable in a way they couldn't name. She had decided, some time ago, to stop making herself smaller to ease their discomfort. "Doing what?" she said. "Listening to the room before you speak, like you're taking attendance." She almost smiled. "I am taking attendance." A pause, then the sound of him shifting, the linen rustling, and she felt the warmth of him settle nearer, not touching, hovering, the way he sometimes did when he wanted to say something and hadn't yet decided whether to say it. Bastian Vale, 23 years old, 2 years older than her, son of the woman her father had married and then died trying to please, leaving Seraphine in a house that had never wanted her. Bastian was different from his mother. That was what she had believed. That was what she had needed to believe. He smelled of wood smoke and cold air tonight, like he'd been outside recently, which was strange. It was well past midnight. She could tell from the way the house breathed, from the particular quality of the silence that fell over estates after the servants went to bed, and the fires were banked down to embers in all but the rooms still occupied. "Sarah," he said. Are you happy here?" She went still. In 4 years, in all the conversations they had ever had, and there had been many, because Bastian sought her out in ways that she'd never been able to fully explain to herself, sitting with her in the library when she was reading by touch, walking with her in the gardens, and describing the colors of the flowers without being asked. He had never once asked her that question. Are you happy here? Why are you asking me that? She said carefully. I'm just... A pause. He exhaled. She heard something in it that she couldn't quite categorize. Some emotion that didn't fit the register she associated with him. Not guilt exactly. Not grief. Something adjacent to both. I think about it sometimes. Whether any of this is... Bastian. Yes. What's wrong? Silence. It lasted long enough that the fire spoke again. A small, domestic pop. A shifting log. The sigh of settling ash. Somewhere below them, in the belly of the house, a clock chimed once for the half hour. 1:30 in the morning, she thought. Or 2:30. The clock on the ground floor ran 10 minutes fast. Nothing, he said finally. Go back to sleep. She almost believed him. She was very good at almost believing things. It was the skill that 4 years in this house had honed most sharply in her. The ability to take a half-truth and smooth it, in her mind, until it resembled something comfortable enough to rest in, to take the edge off her stepmother Ariadne's coldness and call it reserve, to take Bastian's furtive absences and call them restlessness, to take the fact that she was never included in discussions about estate finances, about her father's will, about the future of the Callaway holdings, and call it consideration. They didn't want to burden her. They were protecting her. She had almost believed that too. Bastian, she said, one more time. Sleep, Sarah. He said it gently. That was the thing about Bastian. Everything he did was gentle. The way he steadied her elbow when she navigated new spaces. The way he read to her sometimes, from the books she loved, in that low, unhurried voice. The way he always told her when there was a step, when there was a threshold, when the ground changed beneath her feet, warning her. She had thought that was love, or something close enough to it to matter. She tucked the word away, sleep, and let herself go still, and after a while, she heard his breathing change, deepen, slow into the particular rhythm of real rest. She didn't sleep. She lay there and listened to the house. This was the other thing blindness had given her that no one talked about, the inability to pretend to you'd, to pretend to look at something across the room, to perform distraction. When Seraphine went still and quiet, she was not resting. She was attending. Every sound in the house was a word in a language she'd spent 21 years learning to read. The fire settling, the wind against the north windows. It was coming from the north tonight, which meant rain before dawn. The distant, infrequent sound of a horse in the stables shifting its weight, which meant the stable boy had left a window cracked, which meant someone had been in and out of the stables recently enough that he'd opened it for the light and forgotten to close it. And then something else. A sound she couldn't immediately name. Below her, not the ground floor, somewhere between, the half landing maybe, or the small sitting room directly beneath the east hearth, the one Ariadne used for her private correspondence. A voice, low, careful, deliberate, and then a second voice, answering. Seraphine sat up slowly, making no sound. She found the edge of the bed with her fingertips, oriented herself to the room. 9 steps to the door, the handle was on the right. The hinges were silent if you lifted the door slightly as you turned the handle, which she had learned in the first month of living here, and moved. She wasn't afraid yet. Fear would come later. Right now there was only the sound of 2 voices in a room below her, in a house that should have been sleeping, and the particular quality of their low, deliberate tones that told her, in the language she'd spent years learning, that they were speaking about something they did not intend to be overheard. She reached the door, lifted it, turned the handle, opened it without sound. The hallway was cold, the way hallways always were at night, the warmth of the day long gone from the stone walls, and she moved along the left side because the left side was 3 inches narrower from the baseboard and her fingertips could rest against the wall without reaching. She'd measured it in those first months, pacing the house alone, mapping it, memorizing it, refusing to need a guide in her own home. She reached the landing and stopped, because now the voices were clear. Not loud, but clear. And the first one was Ariadne, her stepmother, her father's widow, the woman who managed the estate and controlled the purse, and signed every document relating to the Callaway holdings, including the ones that should have required Seraphine's signature as her father's only blood heir. And the second voice, Seraphine pressed her back to the wall. The second voice was Bastian. Of course it was Bastian. Can't keep delaying, Ariadne was saying, in that clipped, precise way she had, every syllable a small closed door. The delegation arrives in 4 days. If she is still here when they come, there will be questions. There won't be questions, Bastian said. No one asks questions about her. No one has, since father. Your father is dead. Flat, final. The way Ariadne always said it, like it was a decision that had been made rather than something that had happened. And the holdings passed to her in his will, which means as long as she is alive and present, we have no clear legal claim. The solicitor was very specific. I know what the solicitor said. Then you know what needs to happen. A long silence. Seraphine had stopped breathing. She didn't notice until she felt the ache in her chest, and made herself inhale, slow and silent, through her nose. The physician says it's working. Bastian's voice had changed. Something had left it. That warmth, that gentleness, the quality she had spent 4 years calling kindness. What remained was something flatter, careful. He said 2 more weeks at the current dosage, and her system will be compromised enough that any ordinary illness. 2 weeks is too long. Mother. The delegation, Bastian. 4 days. Another silence. Then, I'll speak to the physician, see if the timing can be accelerated. Seraphine stood in the dark hallway of a house she had mapped to the inch, a house she had believed was hers, and felt the floor change beneath her feet in a way that had nothing to do with architecture. The current dosage. 2 more weeks. Her system will be compromised enough. She thought of the tea she drank every morning, the special blend Ariadne had insisted on. Good for the nerves, good for the digestion. The physician recommended it. She thought of the headaches she'd developed in the last 6 months, the dizzy spells she'd attributed to not sleeping well. She thought of the physician who visited every fortnight and always asked her the same questions with the same careful, measured voice that she now understood was not concern but calibration. She thought of her father, who had died of an ordinary illness, who had been, by all accounts, a healthy man at 52, who had drunk the same tea every morning. She turned 9 steps back to her room. She didn't count them, she just moved. And in her room she found the small travel bag she kept packed under the bed. She'd started keeping it packed 8 months ago without letting herself fully admit why. The way you sometimes do a thing that your body understands before your mind is ready to. And she pulled it out, and she found her boots by feel, the familiar shape of the left one first, always the left, and she put them on. She didn't take much. She took the bag. She took the small wrapped parcel of documents she kept inside it. Her father's original will, the copy she had the solicitor send to her privately, the one she kept because she had learned, somewhere in the first months of living in this house, that information was the only kind of wealth that couldn't be taken from you while you slept. She took her warmest cloak. She took the small leather coin purse that held the money she'd been quietly saving for 2 years, telling no one, telling herself she was saving for nothing in particular, the way you light a candle before a storm even when the sky looks clear. She was at the window. First floor was too high to jump safely. She'd mapped that too. The trellis. North side of the building. The climbing roses that Ariadne never had cut back because she liked the look of them from the ground. Seraphine had used it once, in the summer, to sit on the roof and feel the sun. A private thing. Small, guilty pleasure. She'd memorized the holds then, the spacing of the iron lattice, the way the wood of the sill felt under her palms as she swung out. She swung out now. The night hit her like cold water. Rain was beginning. Light, thin, not yet the full-throated storm she'd heard in the north wind, but coming. She could feel it building in the quality of the air, in the way the cold had a wet edge to it. Below her the garden was silent. She found the trellis, found the first hold, the second, descended. Her boots hit the ground, and she ran. She had been running for perhaps 10 minutes. She didn't know. Time moved strangely when there was nothing to see, when the whole world narrowed to the sound of gravel beneath her feet, and the rain on her face, and the burn in her lungs. When she reached the road, she could tell it was the road by the surface. Packed earth rather than gravel. Rutted, she could feel the edges of the ruts with each step, the way the ground rose and fell in the particular rhythms of a cart track used for decades by wheels of the same gauge. She stopped. The rain was heavier now. And the road was dark. Of course the road was dark. Every road was dark. She laughed. A small, involuntary sound that came out wrong. Not humor, but something pressed too hard in a space too small. And pressed on. She didn't have a direction. She had a way. A way was enough. A way was all she'd ever needed to be good at. Away from the cold marble of the Calloway Manor. Away from the men who looked at a blind girl and saw a liability. Away from the tea that tasted of chamomile, and something else she'd never been able to name. She could name it now. The rain intensified. She was soaked to the skin within minutes. The cloak helped, but not enough. The rain was getting inside the hood, running down the back of her neck, and the road was starting to turn beneath her feet, the packed earth going soft and slick, and she moved to the side where the grass verge was more forgiving and... The sound came before the carriage. She registered it in the order a blind person always registers things. Sensation first, then sound, then the sudden understanding of what both mean. The vibration in the ground, the thunder of hooves, the crack of wheels in wet ruts, and the spray of cold water, and the voice of a coachman shouting something she couldn't parse in time. She stumbled backward. Her heel caught the verge. The world tilted. And then something caught her. Not something. Someone. A hand closed around her arm. One hand, firm but not rough, pulling her back from the road edge with exactly enough force and no more. She felt the air displacement of the carriage as it swept past, close enough that she could smell the lacquer on the wheel hubs, the leather of the harnesses, the cold rain smell of horses moving fast. The carriage passed. The sound receded. And she was standing in the rain on the side of the road with a stranger's hand around her arm, and she was shaking. She hadn't noticed the shaking until this moment, hadn't noticed that her whole body had turned to something loose and unreliable, the composure she'd built over the last 10 minutes cracking now that the immediate danger was past. "You're all right." The voice. She would remember later, when she had the distance to think clearly, that the first thing she registered about it was not the tone, or the timbre, or the accent, though all of those would become important later. The first thing she registered was the pace of it. He spoke those two words slowly, distinctly, leaving space between them, as if he understood without being told that she needed a moment to hear them properly. "You're all right," he said again, because she still hadn't responded, and most people filled silences with escalation. "Are you hurt? What were you doing? You almost..." But he didn't. He just offered the same two words again, steadily, like a lamp held out in the dark. She turned her face toward him, found his shape in the rain, not sight, never sight, but the displacement of air, the warmth of another body in the cold, the sound of his breathing, controlled and even. "I am," she said. Her voice was steadier than she expected. "All right, thank you." A pause, then carefully. "You're soaked through. It's going to be a bad storm. I can hear it coming. So can I." "Yes." She could hear him reassessing something. "I imagine you can. A beat. My carriage is just ahead. I'd offer it to you. There's a town shelter about 2 miles north, but only if you're comfortable accepting that from a stranger whose name you don't know yet. Only if you're comfortable." 2 hours ago she'd been lying in a warm bed and believing in things. She listened to the rain. She listened to the sound of his breathing, which was not anxious, not calculated, not the tight, careful sound of someone performing kindness. It was just breathing. "What's your name?" she said. "Roman," he said. Just the one name, no title, no family, just Roman. Like an offering held in an open palm, nothing hidden in the closed fist behind his back. She picked up her bag. "Mine is Seraphine," she said. "And yes, I'll accept." The carriage door closed behind her. The rain hammered the roof, and somewhere back down the dark road, in a house she had mapped to the inch and would never return to, Ariadne's clock chimed 3 in the morning. Seraphine pressed her hands flat against her knees to stop the shaking. She didn't know, yet, that the hands that had just caught her were the steadiest hands in 6 kingdoms. She didn't know yet what the man sitting across from her in the dark was. She only knew that when he'd said her name back to her, quietly, carefully, like he was making sure he had it right, something in her chest had done a thing it hadn't done in 4 years. It had felt, just briefly, like a door. Opening. Chapter 2. The carriage moved like it was apologizing for the road. Seraphine noticed that first, the way it absorbed the ruts and stones with a kind of cushioned authority that spoke of real craftsmanship, not the jostling, rattling indignity of hired transport. The suspension was exceptional. The wheels were large. The interior smelled of good leather and something underneath it. Cedar, she thought, and something faintly resinous she couldn't immediately name. Clean and cold and faintly wild, like a forest after rain but warmer. She cataloged all of this in the first 30 seconds because cataloging was how she stayed calm, and she needed very badly to stay calm right now. Roman was sitting across from her. She could feel the weight distribution of the carriage shift slightly with his presence. He was large, she decided, not in an aggressive way, but in the way of someone who occupied space without apology, whose body simply was where it was without performance or reduction. He hadn't spoken since the carriage began moving. He wasn't filling the silence with questions or reassurances, or the particular kind of talking that people did when they were uncomfortable with a blind person and couldn't stop looking at her eyes. He was just sitting, being in the space without making it smaller. She found that, strangely, more unnerving than questions would have been. She knew how to handle questions. She'd been handling them since she was 7 years old. Can you see anything at all? Not even shadows? What happened? Were you born that way? Does it hurt? She had answers for all of them, worn smooth as river stones from years of use. Questions she could manage. Silence was harder. Silence asked nothing, and therefore gave her nothing to push against. There's a blanket to your left, he said. About 8 inches, folded on the seat, if you want it. She found it without reaching twice. Wool, thick, warm. It had been sitting near the heated footrest that she'd already registered through the soles of her wet boots. She pulled it around her shoulders and felt some of the shaking begin to ease. Thank you, she said. The town is called Mireth, he said. The shelter there is run by a woman named Hesta. She's decent, discreet, and doesn't ask more than a person wants to answer. You'd be safe there. She filed that away. Discreet. He'd chosen that word specifically. Not kind, not helpful. Discreet. Which meant he understood, without her saying so, that she was running from something she didn't want traced. You said that carefully, she said. Said what carefully? Discreet. You picked that word. A pause. And then, she was almost certain of it, the faintest sound of him almost smiling. Not quite. Just the quality of a breath that was doing something other than moving air. I notice things, he said. So do I. I know, he said. You've been mapping the carriage since you sat down. You know how wide it is, and approximately how long. You know the window is to your right, and about 18 inches away. And you know I'm larger than average because you felt the suspension adjust when I got in. She went very still. Not frightened, or not only frightened. Something else alongside it. Something she didn't have an immediate word for. The feeling of meeting a kind of attention that matched your own. Most people don't notice me noticing, she said. Most people aren't paying attention to what other people are paying attention to. She turned that over, let it settle. Where are you traveling? She asked. North, he said, simply, no elaboration. She could push on it. She chose not to. He had given her a destination without giving her details, which was the same thing she'd done. She'd given him her name without giving him a reason, and he hadn't asked. They were, she realized, extending each other the same courtesy. The courtesy of being allowed to carry your own story without being asked to put it down and open it for inspection. She pulled the blanket tighter. Outside, the rain had graduated to something serious. She could hear it hitting the carriage roof in sheets, could hear the wind working itself into the trees along the road, could feel the slight sideways pressure of gusts against the carriage body. The coachman above was good. The horses didn't falter. Whoever Roman was, his staff knew their work. Can I ask you something? She said. Yes. Why did you have your carriage door open in this weather? A beat. Why do you think I did? Because you heard me on the road before the driver did, she said. You were already at the door, which means you'd been listening to something outside, and what you heard was a person moving in the rain, which shouldn't have been audible over the weather to most people, but apparently was to you. So you opened the door and leaned out, and that's how you were close enough to catch me when I stumbled. The silence that followed this was different from his earlier silences. Those had been comfortable, chosen, deliberate. This one had a different texture. Something surprised in it, and then something else. Something she couldn't quite read. Almost like the silence of someone recalibrating. "You're right," he said. Just that. No explanation for how he'd heard her. No explanation for the quality of his hearing that would have had to be exceptional to catch the sound of her footsteps over that rain. She let it go. She would think about it later. "The coachman," she said instead. "He called out when he saw me on the road." "What did he say?" "I couldn't make it out." "He said clear the way." Standard warning. "He wasn't angry?" "No. He was frightened." A pause. "You were very close to the wheels." She absorbed that. Felt the retroactive lurch of it. Not fear exactly. She'd processed the fear already, and it had somewhere to go. It was moving through her and out. But something more like the vertiginous sense of understanding how close the margin had been. 2 seconds. 1 second. The difference between this carriage and the road. "I didn't hear it coming," she said. Not an apology, just a fact. "The rain was loud," he said. Not absolving her, just another fact. She appreciated that. She was very tired of people absolving her of things. They rode in silence for a while. She was beginning to dry out, the blanket doing real work now, the heated footrest slowly pulling the cold out of her boots. Her heartbeat had settled. The shaking had stopped. She was aware of a particular quality of exhaustion settling over her. Not sleep, not yet. Her mind was far too active for sleep. But the bone-deep heaviness that comes after sustained fear releases its grip on your muscles. She was thinking about the tea. She kept coming back to it. The tea, the headaches, the way she'd been sleeping too much in the last 3 months, and attributing it to the gray winter light she couldn't see, but somehow felt anyway. The particular gloom of it pressing on the house. She'd been sleeping too much and eating too little, and the dizzy spells had started so gradually, she'd barely noticed the escalation. Her system will be compromised enough that any ordinary illness. Her father had died of an ordinary illness at 52. She pressed her hands flat against her thighs and breathed. "You don't have to talk," Roman said from across the carriage. "If you're thinking through something, I won't interpret the quiet as anything it isn't." She looked up, turned her face toward him, the way she did, and felt, for the third time in this conversation, that strange sensation of meeting an attention that matched her own. "How long have you been traveling?" she asked. 3 days. "From where?" A small pause. "The eastern border." She nodded slowly. The eastern border. That was significant. The eastern territories were wolf country, had been for generations. The great packs that ran the highland passes and the river valleys below them. She'd never been east. She knew it from maps she'd had described to her, from books she'd read by touch, from travelers' accounts she'd absorbed in the years when the Callaway Library was still accessible to her, and she'd spent hours in it, building a world out of other people's words. "You're a wolf," she said. It wasn't a question. She'd known for some time. The scent, that clean, cold, faintly wild thing underneath the cedar and leather, she'd been filing it away, cross-referencing it, and it matched every account she'd ever absorbed of what wolf-blooded people smelled like. That particular outdoor quality that wasn't unwashed but was fundamentally outside, fundamentally something that belonged under open sky. Wolves didn't make her nervous. Wolves she understood. Wolves operated by codes she could learn, hierarchies she could map, instincts that were, in many ways, less opaque than the quiet poisons of human families. "Yes," he said, "and I'm in your territory. You're on a public road that runs through wolf territory." Yes, and there it was again, that breath that was doing something other than moving air. You're very well informed for someone who just ran out of a house in the rain. "I've had a lot of time to read," she said, "and a good memory. Exceptional memory." She said it without vanity. It was just true, the way her other compensations were true. "I don't have the option of looking things up twice." A real pause this time, longer. "That must be both useful and exhausting," he said. She blinked. In 21 years, in all the conversations she'd had about her blindness and its attendant adaptations, no one had ever led with exhausting. They led with impressive, with remarkable. With you're so capable, I'd never have known. The soft condescension of people who expected less and were surprised to get more. Useful and exhausting. Both true. Simultaneously, uncomplicatedly true. Yes, she said. Both of those things. She must have drifted, not into sleep, but into that half-state that was its cousin, the body making its own decisions about what it needed, because the next thing she registered was that the rain had changed pitch, which meant they'd passed under tree cover, and that Roman was speaking in a low voice to someone outside the carriage window. She came back fully without showing it. The voice outside was young, male, slightly nervous in its deference, not to a peer, she registered, but to a superior, someone it was trying to impress, and slightly afraid of disappointing. The phrasing was formal. The tone was that particular blend of efficiency and anxiety that she associated with people who served someone they genuinely respected. Detained at the northern pass, my lord. The bridge is... She caught my lord and filed it. Can route through Meerith and rejoin the company at Vale's crossing by. She caught the company and filed that too. Roman's response was quiet. She caught the cadence of authority in it. Not loudness, not command performance, but that particular quality of someone whose voice other people automatically organized themselves around. Not because they were afraid, but because the voice had weight. The outer conversation ended. The carriage rolled on. She waited. My apologies, Roman said, returning to the interior quiet. A route change. It adds a little time. I heard, she said. He didn't ask what she'd heard. Another thing she was filing. Your company is waiting for you, she said. They can wait a little longer. How many? Enough. She turned the word over. Enough was not a number. Enough was a choice to not answer that particular question, offered without being rude about it. She respected that. She did it herself. The town you mentioned, Meerith, she said. Can I ask you something about it? Yes. Is it the kind of town that will turn a woman over to whoever comes asking for her, or the kind that minds its own affairs? A pause. She heard him reading the real question inside the surface one. It minds its affairs, he said, especially in wolf territory. Wolves extend hospitality to those who need shelter and don't ask their business. It's older than law. Old law is sometimes better than new law, she said. In my experience, he agreed. Yes. She nodded. She was quiet for a moment. Then, because she was 21 years old and exhausted, and something in this man's voice had been consistently, stubbornly decent in a way she hadn't experienced recently enough to be immune to it. I'm not in danger right now, she said, from anything outside this carriage. I want you to know that. I'm not being chased. Not yet. She paused. But I may have information that makes me inconvenient to certain people, and inconvenient people in large houses sometimes become unwell very quickly. She felt him absorbing this. He didn't rush it, didn't ask her to clarify or to explain, or to trust him with more than she'd offered. Then Meerith is the right choice, he said. Hesta will see you settled. And if you need anything further. A small pause. Wolf hospitality extends to more than one night's shelter. That's very generous for a stranger. Perhaps, he said. And then, quietly, though I'm not certain stranger is quite the right word anymore. She didn't answer. She tucked the word away instead, turned it over, examined its edges in the dark where all her thinking happened, and let herself, very carefully, feel the faint warmth of it. Outside, the rain was beginning to ease. And somewhere ahead, through the thinning storm, she could smell wood smoke, and the particular density of air that meant buildings, and human warmth, and the specific scent of a town that had been in the same place for 100 years and intended to stay there. Meerith. She was still alive. She was still moving. She still had her father's will in the bag beneath her fingers. She held on to those three things and let them be enough. The carriage slowed. And Roman leaned forward. She felt the subtle shift of his weight, the displacement of air as he moved, and said, in that low, careful voice, "We're here. I'll walk you in, if that's all right. I want to make sure Hesta is awake." "You don't have to." "I know," he said. "I'd like to." She considered saying no. She was very practiced at saying no, at not needing, at not accepting, at building the distance that kept people from getting close enough to let you down. She thought of Bastian's voice in the hallway. Her system will be compromised enough. She thought about what it had cost her to trust the wrong people with her safety. And then she thought, with a clarity that surprised her, that there might be a difference, a real and meaningful difference, between trusting someone with your safety and allowing someone to walk you through a door. "All right," she said. She let him offer his arm on the step down from the carriage. She took it. And she noticed, even then, even in that first point of contact, his forearm steady under her hand, his pace adjusting naturally to hers without being asked, the way he said "step up," small one, when they reached the inn threshold. She noticed that he smelled more strongly of the wild now, in the cold air outside the carriage. Forest after rain. Something large and powerful and deeply, fundamentally alive. She had lived among wolves in books for years. She had never stood this close to one. She filed the feeling away and walked through the door. Behind her, in the dark, one of Roman's men leaned close to the coachman and whispered something. The coachman shook his head slowly, watching his lord guide a blind girl through a lit doorway, with the focused, unhurried care of someone handling something irreplaceable. "Who is she?" the man whispered. The coachman watched a moment longer. "No idea," he said, "but he hasn't walked anyone through a door like that in 6 years." Inside, Roman's hand hadn't left her elbow, and the bond, deep in his chest, in the place where wolves carry the thing they don't choose and can't refuse, something had begun to pull. Chapter 3. Hesta was exactly what her name sounded like. Seraphine decided this within 40 seconds of the woman opening the inn door. Broad, warm, carrying the particular smell of someone who had been baking before dawn, because sleep was a thing that happened to other people. Flour and wood smoke, and the faint sweetness of dried herbs hung near a heat source. Her voice was the shape of a woman who had been telling people what they needed, before they knew they needed it, for approximately 40 years, and had never once been wrong about it. "In," she said, to both of them, without preamble. "Storm's not done." "Hesta," Roman said, and his voice carried a different quality here, still that weighted authority, but warmer, like a fire that had been permitted to show its actual heat, rather than maintaining the controlled burn of a public face. "I have a guest who needs a room. Quiet, private, settled for as long as she needs." "I can hear that," Hesta said, and Seraphine understood she was being looked at with the frank, comprehensive attention of someone who assessed people the way a physician assessed patients, not unkindly, but without sentimentality. "Come in, girl. Let me get something warm into you before you fall over." Seraphine didn't protest being called girl. From Hesta it felt like an endearment rather than a reduction. The inn was small. She could tell from the acoustics, the way sound returned from surfaces close and warm, rather than dispersing into a large space. 4 tables at most in the common room, she thought. Stone floor, thick walls, the fire loud and immediate and properly tended. She counted 12 steps from the door to the hearth before Hesta steered her to a chair. Roman stayed. She'd expected him to hand her off at the door. That was what people did. They passed you along, mission complete. But he sat at the table beside her while Hesta produced something hot in a clay cup that smelled of ginger and honey, and something Seraphine couldn't identify, but which her body responded to with immediate animal relief. She didn't drink it immediately. She held the cup in both hands and let the warmth come through the clay. "It's safe," Roman said, from her left, quietly, not pointed, not loaded with meaning, just offered. She drank. It was the right thing to say, and he'd known it, and she hated, slightly, how much she appreciated that. Hesta moved around the room doing several things at once. Seraphine tracked her by sound, the particular busy efficiency of her path from hearth to back room to stairs and back. And Roman was quiet, the way he'd been quiet in the carriage, the comfortable, undemanding quiet of someone who understood that silence was not empty. "You're staying nearby?" Seraphine asked. "Tonight, yes. I have lodging arranged. Not here. No, a mile north." A pause, but close enough if anything. "I'll be fine," she said. Not sharp, just certain. "I know," he said. And she believed that he meant it. Not as reassurance, not as the polite agreement of someone who didn't believe her, but as a genuine statement. He'd watched her navigate his carriage, navigate the rain, navigate Hesta's inn, and he'd updated his model of her accordingly. She heard him stand. He was leaving then. She registered a drop in temperature that had nothing to do with the fire. "Seraphine," he said. She tilted her face up. "If you need anything, anything at all, Hesta knows how to reach me. You don't need a reason. You don't need it to be an emergency." A pause, and she heard him choosing his next words with the same care he applied to everything. "I'd simply like to know you're all right, if that's not overstepping." She held the clay cup between her palms and thought about the last person who had said they wanted to know she was all right. Bastian, who had been calibrating her decline and reporting it to his mother. "It's not overstepping," she said. She heard him leave. The door closed. And Seraphine sat by the fire in a town she'd never visited with a woman she'd met 10 minutes ago and let herself feel, very carefully, the full weight of everything that had happened in the last 3 hours. It was considerable. Hesta gave her a room on the ground floor. "Easier," she said, without making it a thing. Just practicality. Seraphine loved her immediately for it. The room was small and smelled of lavender and clean linen, and the cold stone of a building that held winter in its walls, despite the fire burning in the small hearth. The bed was real, not a cot, not a charity arrangement, but a proper bed with a feather mattress and wool blankets, and a pillow that smelled of nothing at all, which meant it had been recently washed. She sat on the edge of it and opened her bag. The documents were there. She checked by touch. The particular texture of the solicitor's seal on the outer fold of her father's will, the smoother paper of the private copy, the small personal letter her father had written her 2 months before he died, which she'd had read to her 4 times and had memorized completely. "My Seraphine, my clever girl, everything in this world that is mine is yours. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I am sorry I did not see sooner. I am sorry I chose comfort over clarity. That is the particular failure of men who are not brave enough to look at things directly. You have never had that failure. I am more proud of you than I have ever known how to say." She pressed the letter flat against her chest. She didn't cry. She had cried for her father in the first months. She'd cried privately, thoroughly, in the way she did everything, completely, without performance, without asking for witness. She was done with that particular grief, or done enough. What remained was something cooler, more useful, purpose. She lay back on the bed. She was very tired. And something was happening. She noticed it the way she noticed most things, not all at once, but in accumulating details that eventually assembled themselves into a picture. A warmth that wasn't the fire, a sensation behind her sternum, faint but insistent, like the first note of a sound that was mostly felt rather than heard. A pull, that was the only word she had for it. A pull in the direction of north, which was the direction Roman had gone, which could not possibly be relevant. She pressed a hand to her chest. The warmth pulsed. She had read about this. She had read, in the books she'd spent years absorbing, about the mate bond, the thing wolves carried, the deep instinctive recognition that bypassed choice and preference and sense entirely, that operated below the level of decision-making, in the body's oldest architecture. She had read about it the way she'd read about everything she couldn't directly experience, with thorough attention and the comfortable detachment of the academic. She was no longer detached. She pressed her hand harder against her sternum and breathed. It wasn't the bond. It couldn't be. She wasn't a wolf. She was human. Entirely, ordinarily human. No wolf blood, no pack affiliation, no claim on any of the mate bond mechanics that governed wolf pairings. Humans and wolves could form bonds of attachment, of loyalty, of love. But the mate bond, the thing wolves described in those low, reverent tones that she'd absorbed from their accounts, that was specific to wolf-blooded pairs. Wasn't it? She exhaled. It was proximity, she told herself. Adrenaline. The contrast between the cold of the road and the warmth of the inn, and the specific quality of the last 3 hours, which had been, objectively, a great deal to process. Her body was doing what bodies did under sustained stress, finding anchors, finding warmth, building attachment to whatever had been kind to it in the crisis. Roman had been kind. That was all this was. She let herself believe that. She was, she reflected, very tired of the things she let herself almost believe. She slept. She didn't expect to. She'd thought her mind was too loud, too full, too busy running through what she needed to do next. Find a solicitor, contact the capital, get the will registered properly, make the Callaway holdings legally undeniable. But her body overruled her mind the way exhausted bodies do, and she was under before she'd finished her next thought. She dreamed. She rarely dreamed, or rarely remembered dreaming, but when she did, her dreams were almost entirely sound and texture rather than image. They were acoustic dreams. This one was no different. She was in a forest. She knew it was a forest because the air was layered. Leaf mold and cold water, and the deep green smell of things that lived slowly and permanently. And because she could hear wind moving through something high and broad overhead. She was standing on ground that felt like real earth, compacted and rooted, and the light was, well, there was no light, not for her, but there was warmth, the warmth that she associated with sun, even though she had no image of sun, the physical fact of it on her upturned face. And there was breathing. Large, slow, from her left. She turned. The breathing shifted, something large adjusting its position, not threateningly, the way a very large animal settles when it wants to communicate that it is not a threat. She heard it lie down. The sound of it, the compression of undergrowth, the exhale, was approximately 10 feet away. She wasn't afraid. That was the strange part. By any rational accounting, she should have been afraid, alone in a dark forest with a large predator breathing 10 feet away. But the fear didn't come. Instead, there was the warmth in her chest, the pull that she'd felt before sleep, and the specific quality of quiet that she associated with things that were, at their base, on her side. She took a step toward the breathing. The breathing didn't change. She took another. And another. Close enough now that she could feel the heat of it. A living warmth, real and specific. Not the abstract warmth of a fire, but the warmth of a body. A large body. Something that breathed and had a heartbeat that she could hear now beneath the breathing. Steady and slow and very calm. She reached out. Her fingers found fur. Deep, dense, thick fur under her palm. Not soft the way a house animal was soft, but alive in a way that house animals rarely managed. The fur of something that had run through real weather, and real cold, and real world, and had come through it entirely itself. And then, Seraphine. She woke. The fire had burned low. The room was gray with early light. She could feel the quality of it changing even without seeing it. The particular shift in how cold felt when dawn began to press against it. She lay still, catching her breath. The pull in her chest was stronger. She sat up and pressed the heel of her hand against her sternum, and felt it pulse against her palm like a second heartbeat. This was not attachment to a kindness. She didn't know what it was, but she was done calling it the wrong thing just because the right thing was inconvenient. She got up. She found her boots, her cloak. Hesta had dried it, she realized. It had been hung near the hearth while she slept, and replaced at the foot of her bed sometime in the night. She put it on. She needed to think, and she thought better moving. The town was waking. She could hear it. The particular soundscape of a small settlement finding its morning. The first carts on cobblestones. The sound of a pump being worked somewhere to her north. The smells of bread and livestock and cold air and yesterday's rain. Myreth was larger than it had seemed in the dark. The streets were uneven in the way of old towns. The cobblestones worn into patterns she had to read with every step. But she'd been navigating new spaces her whole life, and she moved with the particular unhurried competence that came from having learned to trust her feet more than her expectations. She was thinking about the mate bond. She was thinking about the fact that she was human. She was thinking about her mother, who she barely remembered. Her mother had died when Seraphine was 4, before the blindness, and the memories were largely textural, rather than coherent. The smell of her, the specific sound of her voice reading stories, a phrase she'd used often that Seraphine had absorbed without understanding. You are more than what they see, my love. You always were. She had never known what to do with that. It had felt like a general comfort rather than specific information. She was beginning to wonder if it had been specific information all along. You're up early. She stopped. Roman. She turned her face toward him. He was ahead and to her left, approximately 12 feet, standing, she thought, at the edge of the street, and she heard behind him the faint sound of other presences, his men, maintaining a distance that suggested they'd been instructed to give space. "So are you," she said. "I didn't sleep." He said it without complaint or performance, just a fact. She walked toward him until she was close enough for conversation and stopped. "Neither did I," she said. "Not properly. Something keeping you awake?" She considered how to answer this. She could be oblique. She was very good at oblique. She'd been practicing it for 4 years in a house that punished directness. She could say much on my mind and let him accept it and move on. She looked in his direction and said, "Can I ask you something that requires an honest answer and may be uncomfortable to give?" A pause. "Yes." "Is it possible?" She stopped. Started again. "In your experience, your specific experience, as a wolf, is it possible for the mate bond to recognize something in a human, someone with no wolf blood?" The silence that followed was the longest he'd given her yet. She counted 4 seconds. 5. "Where are you feeling it?" he said. His voice was careful, controlled, something underneath the control that was not controlled at all. "Here," she said, and pressed her hand to her sternum. 6 seconds. "Seraphine." His voice had dropped. "How long?" "Since the carriage," she said. "I thought it was adrenaline. I thought it was gratitude. I've been calling it wrong things." She heard him exhale. Long, slow. "It's not something that happens," he said. "Between a wolf and a human, it shouldn't be possible." And yet, he agreed. She waited. He took 2 steps toward her. She tracked him by sound and displacement, and stopped. Close enough that she could smell that cold, wild thing clearly now, the forest after rain warmth of him, and the pull in her chest shifted from pulse to something more insistent. "I felt it in the carriage," he said quietly. "I thought," he paused. "I also called it wrong things." She absorbed this. "This is impossible," she said. "Yes. And you believe it anyway." "I believe what my body is telling me," he said. "Wolves don't argue with the bond. We've learned not to." "I'm human," she said. "I argue with everything." "I know." And there it was again, that breath that was doing something other than moving air. The one she was beginning to understand was him almost smiling. "I think that might be why it chose you." She turned the words over. It chose you. She had been, she reflected, chosen very badly by people who were supposed to know her. She had been chosen by a father who loved her, but loved peace more. By a stepmother who saw her as an obstacle. By a stepbrother who had sat beside her in the dark and spoken to her with a gentleness that was calibration rather than care. This was different. She didn't yet know how to say the ways in which it was different. She only knew that the warmth in her chest was real, and that Roman was standing 3 feet away in the early morning light of a town she'd never been to, and that he had not, in the entire duration of their acquaintance, asked her to be smaller, or slower, or more grateful than she was. "I need to tell you something." "All right?" "I have documents. Proof of inheritance. A will that's been suppressed by people who want what's in it to remain unregistered." She paused. "I am going to need, at some point, access to a legal authority that can't be bought or pressured. The people I'm dealing with have influence. They've been using it quietly for years." "What kind of influence?" "Enough to silence a physician," she said. "Enough to keep an estate solicitor cooperative. Enough to let a young woman become quietly ill without anyone asking the right questions." Another silence, different from the others. This one had weight in it. She could feel him processing what she wasn't quite saying, filling in the shape of the space around her words. "They were poisoning you," he said. Flat, quiet, and underneath the quiet, something that was not quiet at all. Slowly, she confirmed, the kind that looks like failing health. She heard something happen in his breathing then, not visible, not loud, but the precise sound of something large and controlled, deciding not to be controlled, and then deciding again, and winning by a very small margin. "The legal authority you need," he said, carefully. "What level of authority are we talking about?" She thought of the documents in her bag. She thought of Ariadne and her meticulous suppression of everything that bore the Calloway name. She thought of a solicitor who visited every fortnight to calibrate her decline. "High," she said. "It would need to be very high." Roman was quiet for a moment. And then he said something that she would turn over for a long time afterward, would carry with her through everything that came next, would return to in the moments when she needed to understand exactly when the story changed. "Seraphine," he said, "I think there are things about me that I should tell you." She waited. "But I'd like to tell you somewhere warmer, if that's all right." A pause. "And I'd like Hesta to make the tea." "All right," she said. She let him offer his arm for the cobblestones. She took it. And the pull in her chest sang. They walked back toward the inn. Behind them, at a respectful distance, Roman's men exchanged looks. One of them, older, silver-haired, with the watchful eyes of someone who had served for many years, looked at his lord's back and felt something release in his chest that had been held tight for a very long time. He'd been with Roman since before the title, since before the weight of 6 kingdoms settled on those shoulders, since before Roman had stopped walking people through doors. He pulled out a small communication stone, the kind wolves used across distances, and pressed it once. On the other end, in a palace that was 3 days north, someone would feel it pulse. One pulse. The signal they had agreed on 6 years ago, when Roman had told them, "If this ever happens, if you ever feel me pull toward someone, I want to know you know." One pulse. It had finally come. Chapter 4. Hesta made the tea without being asked. Seraphine noticed this, the way the woman simply knew, moving around her kitchen with the authority of someone who had been reading rooms for decades. She set 2 cups down, retreated to the back without a word, and closed the door behind her with the specific quiet of someone choosing not to hear what came next. The fire was high. Roman sat across from her. Seraphine held her cup, different from last night's, this one ceramic, thinner, the tea inside it smelling of black leaves and cardamom and something clean, and waited. She was good at waiting. "You know I'm a wolf," he said. "Yes." "You know I'm traveling with a company, that I came from the eastern border." He paused. "Did you draw any conclusions from that?" She considered being oblique. She decided against it. "A delegation," she said. "Your man mentioned it last night outside the carriage. You're either part of one or you are one." She paused. "The eastern border means the Highland Packs, a large company, traveling with enough resources for good carriage suspension, and a coachman who doesn't panic in a storm." She tilted her head. "You're not part of the delegation. You are what the delegation is coming to meet." Silence. "That's very precise," he said. "I told you. Exceptional memory. Good ears." She set her cup down. "Who are you, Roman?" He said it simply. No preamble. No performance. Roman Vale. Alpha King of the Eastern Territories and the 6 Highland Packs. She absorbed it. She let it move through her the way large information moved. First the surface impact, then the structural implications assembling themselves underneath. Alpha King, 6 packs. Vale, she remembered suddenly, with the sharp clarity of her exceptional memory, the name his man had used outside the carriage window. Vale's Crossing. She'd filed it. She hadn't connected it. "Vale," she said. "Yes. Your man said Vale's Crossing last night." "He did. Named for your family." "For my grandfather, yes." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "You told me your name in the rain, and left off everything else." "You told me yours and left off everything else," he said. It seemed fair. She wanted to argue with that. She found she couldn't. "The legal authority I need," she said slowly. "Yes, you're it. Not precisely. There are courts, councils, proper processes. But I have standing in those processes that cannot be bought or pressured. Not by an estate family, not by a suppressed will, not by anyone currently operating at the level of influence you're describing." He paused. "I can make sure the right people see your documents, that the right questions get asked, that the physician and the solicitor have someone to answer to who they cannot manage." She pressed her hands flat on the table. The warmth in her chest was steady now, not demanding, just present, like a lamp that had been lit and intended to stay lit. "Why?" she said. "Because you're my mate," he said, simply. "I'm human. You're my mate, he said again, without contradiction. The bond doesn't consult me on the logistics. She exhaled. I'm not going to be managed, she said. I want to be clear about that. Not by you, not by the bond, not by anyone. I've spent 4 years being managed by people who called it care. I know. You don't know me yet. No, he agreed. But I know that you mapped my carriage in 30 seconds, diagnosed your own poisoning in real time, packed a go-bag before you consciously admitted you'd need it, and correctly identified my political position from a fragment of overheard conversation. A pause. Managing you would be like trying to manage weather. I'm not interested in the attempt. She was quiet. Something moved in her chest that wasn't the bond. Something older than that. The part of her that had been waiting, without admitting it, for someone to see clearly what she was, and not flinch from it. I don't know what I am, she said. The bond shouldn't work on me. I have no wolf blood, no pack affiliation, nothing that should make me... Seraphine. His voice was quiet. Did your father ever tell you about your mother's family? She stilled. She died when I was 4, she said carefully. He didn't talk about her much. What was her name? Her family name? Slow, careful. Vane, she said. Ilara Vane. The silence that followed had a different shape from all his other silences. The Vane line, he said quietly, has been dormant for 30 years. They are, a bloodline, with wolf ancestry, so diluted that it stopped expressing generations ago. No shift, no enhanced senses, no pack bond. He paused. But the mate recognition can lie dormant too, and occasionally, in the right conditions, it wakes. She sat very still. My mother was wolf-blooded, she said, not a question, a calculation completing itself. Distantly, but yes. Another pause. Which means you are too. Which means the bond isn't impossible. He exhaled. Just very, very rare. She pressed both hands against the table and breathed. Her mother's voice came back to her, worn smooth by years of repetition, kept bright by an exceptional memory that forgot nothing. You are more than what they see, my love. You always were. She had thought it was comfort. It had been a map. She didn't speak for a long moment. Roman didn't fill it. Finally she said, I need time. Yes, he said. There is a great deal happening simultaneously, and I need to sort it by priority. Of course. The documents first. My inheritance, my father's will. That is the immediate problem. The bond is... She paused. The bond is something I'll need to think about with a clearer head than I currently have. Agreed. You'll help me with the documents. Yes. Without it becoming leverage. Without it becoming a reason I owe you something. Seraphine. His voice was firm and quiet. You don't owe me anything. Not for last night. Not for the documents. Not for any of it. Help given in expectation of debt isn't help. It's a transaction wearing a mask. A beat. I've had enough of those. She heard something personal in that last line. Filed it for later. All right, she said. She picked up her tea. Drank. It was good. Properly made. The cardamom bright. The black leaves strong enough to mean business. There's one more thing, she said. Yes. Last night I dreamed about a forest, and something large in it, something that lay down near me and let me find it. She paused. Was that real? The longest silence yet. Wolves can sometimes reach their mates through shared dreaming, he said. In the early stages of bond recognition, when the distance is small enough. Another pause. I was a mile north. You came to me in the dream. I didn't intend to. I'm not certain I was fully aware of it. Something shifted in his voice. Not quite vulnerability, but the edge of it. I'm sorry if it was frightening. It wasn't, she said. She heard him exhale. I reached out, she said. In the dream, I touched. Yes, he said quietly. I know. She absorbed this. Then she picked up her cup again and said, in the most ordinary voice she could manage, I think I would like some breakfast. And then I think you should show me these documents to someone who can begin the legal process. There's a council representative in Mirith, he said. I can have him here within the hour. Good, she nodded. And Roman? Yes. Thank you. For the carriage. For last night. She paused. For telling me the truth this morning, when you didn't have to. You would have figured it out anyway, he said. Yes, she agreed, but it matters that you didn't make me. Hesta appeared in the doorway as if summoned, carrying bread and soft cheese and something that smelled of honey. She set it down, looked between them, and said nothing. But when she went back to her kitchen, she was smiling. And outside, in the thin winter morning, Roman's silver-haired man was already moving toward the council building at the north end of Mirith. In his pocket, the communication stone pulsed twice. The palace, 3 days north, had responded. They were coming. Chapter 5. The council representative was named Aldrich. Seraphine knew within 30 seconds that he was frightened of Roman and trying not to show it. She could hear it in the over-precise enunciation of his words, the slight delay before each answer, the sound of a man choosing every syllable with the care of someone diffusing something. Good. Frightened men were thorough. Thorough men made useful records. She laid her father's will on the table between them. The original, she said, witnessed by 2 solicitors and sealed by the Calloway family notary, dated 14 months before my father's death. She placed the second document beside it, the private copy sent to me directly, with its own seal intact. And this, she placed the third, is a letter in my father's hand, acknowledging that the primary estate holdings, including the Calloway seat and all attached revenues, pass entirely to his blood heir. Which is you, Aldrich said. Which is me. A pause, paper moving, the particular sound of someone reading carefully. Roman sat to her left, saying nothing. His presence was doing its own work. She could feel Aldrich's awareness of him like a third document on the table, an unspoken exhibit. The Alpha King is sitting in this room, and he would like this handled correctly. The estate is currently managed by Ariadne Vale, Seraphine said. My stepmother, widow of Edmund Calloway. She paused. She has been managing it under a document she claims supersedes this will. I have reason to believe that document was produced after my father's death and backdated. Aldrich's pen stopped moving. That is a serious allegation, he said. Yes, she agreed. I have serious evidence. She reached into her bag. She had spent the hours after breakfast doing what she always did when she needed to think clearly. She had organized. She had laid every document she carried on Hesta's clean kitchen table and read them by touch, by memory, by the accumulated knowledge of 4 years spent quietly, carefully building a case she'd hoped she would never need. She placed the next item on the table. This is a letter from the estate physician, written to my stepmother 8 months ago, intercepted by me. He left it unsealed in the morning correspondence tray, which he had done before, and I had learned his habits. She had memorized every word. It outlines the progress of my condition, uses the phrase the subject's tolerance is increasing, requiring dosage adjustment. The subject. She let that sit. He was referring to me. Silence. There is a second letter, she continued, written 3 months later, in which he expresses concern about, and I quote from memory, the timeline accelerating beyond what can be attributed to natural decline. He wanted to slow the process. My stepmother's response, which is also here, instructed him to defer to her judgment on matters of estate management. More silence. Then Aldrich said, quietly, Miss Calloway, are you telling me you were being deliberately— Yes, she said. Slowly, carefully, in a way that would present, upon my death, as a young woman of delicate health who had been declining for some time. She paused, just as my father declined, for approximately 14 months before he died. The room was very still. Roman's breathing had not changed. That steadiness, she was learning, was not absence of feeling. It was the specific control of someone who felt things very strongly and had learned to hold them at a precise internal temperature. I will need to verify, Aldrich began. Verify everything, Seraphine said. I insist on it. I want every document authenticated independently. I want the physician found and questioned by someone he cannot manage. I want the estate accounts audited for the period following my father's death. She paused. I want it done correctly. I'm not interested in speed. I'm interested in permanence. Aldrich was quiet for a moment. Then she heard the unmistakable sound of a man who has just decided which side of a historical moment he wants to be on. His pen began moving again, Faster this time. They were in the council room for 2 hours. When they emerged, the winter sun had climbed to its modest midday height. She could feel it on her face, thin and cold but real, pressing against her left cheek as she turned toward it out of habit. Roman walked beside her. "You prepared that," he said. "The letters, the organization. You'd been building that case for a long time." 8 months, she said, "since I intercepted the first physician's letter. And before that?" She was quiet for a moment. "I think I knew something was wrong from the first year," she said. "I just didn't have a name for it. I kept finding small things, documents missing from where I'd memorized them, conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, the particular quality of silence that a house makes when it is keeping secrets." She paused. "When you can't see faces, you learn to read silence the way other people read expressions." "What did the silence tell you?" "That I was tolerated," she said. "Not wanted. Which is fine. I've been not wanted before. But tolerated has a specific texture. It's patient. It waits." She exhaled. "Tolerated silence is the silence of people who believe they have time on their side. They thought they did. They thought I was manageable," she said. "Because I was blind and young and alone, and my father had just died." She let the winter sun press against her face. "They were wrong about what blind means." Roman was quiet for a moment. Then, "Aldrich will have the authentication process begun by tonight. The estate accounts will be frozen pending review. No transfers, no sales, no legal instruments signed under the Calloway name." A pause. "Your stepmother will know something is wrong within the week." "Sooner," Seraphine said. "She has eyes in the council building. She'll know by tomorrow." "Then we need to move faster than tomorrow." She nodded. "There's someone I need to speak to first," she said, "before any of this becomes public. Before Ariadne has time to prepare her defense." She paused. "The weakest point in their arrangement is not my stepmother. She's careful. She's been doing this for years and she's good at it." She tilted her head. "The weakest point is Bastian." Roman's pace didn't change, but something in the air around him did. "Your stepbrother." "He came to my room the night I left," she said. "He asked me if I was happy. There was something in his voice, not guilt exactly." She thought about it, turning it over with the precision she applied to everything. Doubt. It sounded like doubt. She paused. A man who is fully committed to what he's doing doesn't ask the person he's doing it to whether they're happy. "You think he can be turned?" "I think he was never fully turned to begin with," she said, "which is different, and more useful." A pause. "You'd need to reach him without alerting Ariadne," Roman said. "Yes." "He'll be at the estate." "Yes." "Which is 2 hours south." He paused. "I can have you there before dark." She turned her face toward him. The pull was steady in her chest, reliable as a compass, pointing consistently in his direction no matter which way she physically turned. She thought about what it meant to let someone help her. Not the transaction version, the real version. The kind where you accepted assistance not because you had no choice, but because you'd evaluated the person offering it and decided they were worth the risk. She had evaluated Roman for approximately 18 hours. She had, in that time, found nothing that alarmed her. Several things that the opposite of alarmed her. The way he said, "You don't owe me anything." The way he'd sat in silence in the carriage and not tried to fill it. The way he'd told her his name in the rain and left off the title. The way, in a dream that was apparently real, he had lain down in the dark near her and waited to be found. "All right," she said. 2 hours south." She paused. "And Roman? When we get there, I need to do this myself. You can be nearby, but this conversation with Bastian is mine." "Of course," he said, without hesitation. She nodded. They walked back toward the inn to collect her things. And somewhere, 2 hours south, in a large house full of secrets and chamomile tea, and a clock that ran 10 minutes fast, Bastian Vale sat in the east sitting room and stared at the empty chair where his stepsister used to read, and felt the specific weight of a choice he hadn't yet admitted he was making. The carriage was ready within the hour. Hesta pressed a wrapped package of food into Seraphine's hands at the door and said, gruffly, "Come back through if you need to. Doors always open." Seraphine held the package and felt, unexpectedly, the prick of something behind her eyes. "Thank you," she said. For the room, for the tea. For not asking questions, Hesta said. For not asking questions, Seraphine agreed. She climbed into the carriage. Roman followed. And as Mireth fell away behind them, Seraphine reached into her bag, found her father's letter by touch, and held it in her lap the whole way south. She didn't need to read it. She had never needed to read it twice. Chapter 6. They stopped half a mile from the estate. Roman's idea, or rather his quiet observation that arriving in a carriage bearing the Alpha King's crest might announce things before Seraphine was ready for them, announced. She'd agreed without needing it explained twice. She went on foot. The road was familiar in the way that unpleasant things become familiar. Not comforting, but legible. She knew every change in surface between the crossroads and the estate gate. She knew the gate itself, the specific resistance of the iron latch, the way the left hinge dragged slightly in cold weather. She knew this house. That was her advantage. She went in through the garden entrance. The same trellis, the climbing roses stripped bare by winter, the iron lattice cold under her hands. Not climbing this time, just the gate beside it, the one the groundskeeper left unlatched during daylight hours because he was 63 years old and had decided that rules about gates were for younger men. The garden was silent. She crossed it the way she crossed everything, unhurried, precise, reading the ground through her boots. The east entrance. She knew which floorboards announced themselves and which stayed quiet. She moved through the house like water moving through a known channel, not invisible but unremarkable. The sounds of the house told her what she needed. Kitchen activity to the west, which meant the staff were occupied. Ariadne's particular heel strike absent from the upper floors, which meant she was either out or in her private sitting room at the back of the house, where the acoustics were swallowed by heavy drapery. Bastian. She found him by the fire in the East Library. She knew because he always went to the East Library when he was thinking about something he didn't want to think about. She'd observed it over 4 years, the particular pattern of his retreats, the specific rooms he chose for specific emotional states. The East Library was where he went when he felt guilty. She'd thought, for years, that she was misreading him. She had not been misreading him. She pushed the door open. He moved. She heard the sharp intake of breath, the scrape of a chair, the specific sound of someone startled by what they're seeing. Sarah. His voice broke on the second syllable. How are you? We thought. I know what you thought, she said. She came into the room and found the chair across from his. She knew this room, knew the chair, found it without searching, and sat. She did not take off her cloak. She did not set down her bag. She sat the way you sit when you are not staying, when you have come for one specific thing and intend to leave with it. Sit down, Bastian, she said. He sat. She could hear his breathing, fast, disorganized, nothing like the controlled rhythms of someone who was confident in what they'd done. He was frightened, not of her, she didn't think, of the moment, of what her being here meant. You asked me if I was happy, she said. The night I left, do you remember? Yes, barely audible. Why did you ask me that? Silence. Bastian, her voice was not unkind. She'd thought, on the way here, about how to do this, whether to come in with anger, with evidence, with the cold efficiency of someone who had already won. She'd decided against all of those, not because she wasn't angry. She was. The anger was there, real and specific, like a clean fire burning at a controlled temperature. But she hadn't come for anger. She'd come for truth. I asked because He stopped, started again. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about... Another stop. About what you were doing to me, she said. The silence that followed was the loudest thing she'd ever heard in this house. I didn't know, he said. At first. When it started, Mother told me it was... She said it was a health regimen, that the physician was managing something she'd noticed, some early signs of... I believed her. I believed her for months. And then you stopped believing her. And then his voice cracked. I found one of the letters, the physician's letters, and I understood what the dosage meant, what adjusting the timeline meant. A long exhale, ragged at the edges, and I didn't stop it. She let that sit between them. Why not? She asked. Because I was afraid of her, he said. Because I had been afraid of her my whole life and I didn't know how to. He stopped. That's not enough of a reason. No, she agreed, it isn't. Sarah, I'm not here for an apology, she said. I'm here because you're the weakest point in her arrangement, and I need you to understand that clearly. The documents are already with the council in Mireth. The estate accounts are being frozen. The authentication process has begun. She paused. It's over, Bastian. The only question now is which side of it you're standing on when it finishes. Silence. She'll say I was complicit, he said. You were complicit. I know. Quiet. Wrecked. I know I was. The difference, Seraphine said carefully, between complicit and criminal is whether you help correct it, whether you give testimony, whether you provide the physician's name, the name of the solicitor who backdated the secondary will, and whatever documentation you have access to that I don't. She paused. That difference is significant, legally and otherwise. She heard him working through it, the sound of someone doing calculations they'd been avoiding. She'll know it was me, he said. Yes. She won't. He stopped. She's not safe to cross, Sarah. You know that. I know, she said, which is why you won't be crossing her alone. She paused. There is someone with me. Someone with standing that your mother cannot manage, pressure, or outlast. She let that land. Give me the physician's name. Give me the solicitor's documents. And then I need you to do one more thing. What? I need you to get a message to my stepmother, she said. I need her to come to the council building in Mireth in 2 days. Tell her there's a matter of estate documentation that requires her signature. She paused. Don't tell her I'm alive. Don't tell her about the authentication process. Just the signature. A long silence. You're setting a trap, he said. I'm creating a controlled environment, she said. There's a difference. Another silence. Then, quietly, the physician's name is Soren Aldgate. He practices out of the merchant quarter in the capital. A pause. And the solicitor, the one who produced the secondary will. His name is Ferris Combe. Mother has letters from him. She keeps them in the locked drawer of her writing desk. 3rd drawer, left side. The key is on her watch chain. Seraphine filed all of it. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me, he said. I should have done this months ago. I should have done it the moment I understood what was in those letters. His voice had gone quiet and very tired. I sat in that chair. She heard him gesture, every night for 6 months, and told myself I would do something tomorrow, and Bastian. He stopped. You're doing it now, she said. That matters. She paused. It doesn't erase what happened, but it matters. She stood. She found her bag, confirmed it was closed. Stay in the house, she said. When Ariadne asks about the message, and she will ask, tell her it came through the council's standard correspondence. Nothing unusual. Can you do that? Yes. 2 days, she said. And then it's finished. She moved toward the door. Sarah. His voice stopped her. She waited. The night I asked if you were happy. A pause. I already knew the answer. I think I was asking because I needed to hear myself ask. Needed to know I was still, that some part of me still. I know, she said quietly. She left him in the East Library, with the fire burning low, and the particular silence of a man who had finally, belatedly, chosen. She found the garden gate. The cold hit her. Clean, real, the honest cold of a winter afternoon. She walked back toward the road. 1/2 mile out, a carriage was waiting. And when she climbed in and sat down and the door closed, Roman didn't ask how it went. He just said, "Are you all right?" She pressed her hands flat on her knees. "Yes," she said, and meant it. Chapter 7. Ariadne arrived exactly on time. Seraphine had expected that. Punctuality was a form of control, arriving exactly when expected, never early enough to seem eager, never late enough to seem rattled. She heard the carriage, the particular crisp authority of its stop, the sound of a woman descending steps with the practiced ease of someone who had spent decades making entrances. Heels on cobblestone. Precise. Unhurried. The council building in Mireth was small but formal. Seraphine had spent the previous day learning it, walking its rooms with Roman patient at her side, mapping its dimensions, its acoustics, the specific way sound moved between the anteroom and the main chamber. She knew where every voice would land before a word was spoken. She was already inside when Ariadne entered. She heard the exact moment her stepmother saw her. Not a gasp. Ariadne was far too controlled for gasps. But there was a pause, a fractional interruption in the rhythm of those precise footsteps. One beat of silence that contained, Seraphine knew, an entire recalculation. Seraphine. Her stepmother's voice was warm, controlled, the particular warmth of someone who had decided, in the half-second of recalculation, that warmth was the correct tool. My darling girl, we've been so worried. Sit down, Ariadne, Seraphine said. Another pause. The warmth adjusted itself. Became something cooler, more curious. Seraphine heard her stepmother move, not to the chair she'd been directed toward, but slightly to the left, repositioning to face the room rather than be contained by it. Small power move, noted. You look well, Ariadne said. Better than I'd expected, honestly, given how unwell you'd been. Where have you been staying? We were beside ourselves. The documents on the table in front of you, Seraphine said, are authenticated copies of my father's will. The authentication was completed yesterday by council representatives and independently verified by 2 notaries. She paused. The secondary will, the one you've been operating the estate under, has been examined by the same parties. Silence. And, Ariadne said, still controlled, still warm, but the warmth had gone thin at the edges. The ink on the signature block is 18 months old at most, Seraphine said. My father died 22 months ago. She let that land. The paper, however, is older. You used old stock to make the dating more plausible. The notaries found that interesting. She heard something happen in the room. Not Ariadne, not yet. Aldrich, sitting to the left, shifting his weight in the particular way of someone who is profoundly relieved to be watching this from the correct side of the table. This is... Seraphine, I don't know who has been filling your head with. The physician's name is Soren Aldgate, Seraphine said. He was taken into custody in the capital yesterday morning. He has been cooperative. She tilted her head. The solicitor Ferris Combe was located this morning. He has also been cooperative. She paused. People tend to be cooperative when the alternative is a charge of conspiracy to commit murder. The warmth dropped entirely. What replaced it was something Seraphine had suspected was underneath it all along. Not rage, not panic, but a cold, intelligent assessment. Ariadne was not a woman who panicked. She was a woman who pivoted. You have no standing in this council, Ariadne said. Her voice had changed, still controlled, but different now, the softness gone, the precision of someone shifting to their real register. You are a blind young woman with a collection of documents and a theory. The estate has been managed appropriately, legally, and in the best interests. Of whom? Seraphine asked. Of the family your father built. My father had one family member by blood, Seraphine said. Me. She paused. He said so. Explicitly. In a letter I can recite from memory in its entirety, if the council requires it. She felt Aldrich's pen moving. Would you like me to do that? This is a performance, Ariadne said, and now the voice had gained something, an edge of contempt, of condescension, of the specific tone she'd used for 4 years when speaking to Seraphine about things she believed a blind girl couldn't properly understand. You've been coached. Someone has put you up to this theatrical little. The Alpha King of the Eastern Territories and the 6 Highland Packs would like to register his formal support for Miss Calloway's claim. The voice came from the doorway. Roman. She'd asked him to stay outside. He had agreed, with the specific quiet of someone who intended to honor that agreement precisely, and nothing further. But she had also, she'd thought about this, left the door unlatched. She had not told him to stay in the carriage. Ariadne was silent. For the first time since entering the room, genuinely silent. Not the chosen, controlled silence of someone managing a conversation, but the silence of someone who had just encountered a variable they had not accounted for. Seraphine heard Roman move into the room, the particular displacement of air that accompanied him, the weight of his presence, the quality of attention he generated in a space without doing anything at all. I have correspondence here, Roman said, setting something on the table. She heard the specific sound of an official seal against wood. From the Capitol Court, co-signed by the regional governor and the head of the Highland Council, formally initiating a review of the Callaway estate transfer. A pause. The review cannot be suspended, redirected, or withdrawn by any party currently named in the contested documents. Another silence. And then Ariadne did something Seraphine hadn't anticipated. She laughed. Soft, controlled. The laugh of a woman who had decided, with remarkable speed, that her best remaining move was to seem unbothered. "A blind girl and a wolf king," she said. "How very romantic." She paused. "And how very transparent. You understand, my lord, that aligning yourself with a disputed claim for, what? Political leverage? Territorial expansion? Will be examined very carefully by—" "My motivations," Roman said quietly, "are not the subject of this review." "No," Ariadne agreed, "but they'll become the subject of considerable discussion when I bring this before the full regional council. When I point out that an alpha king with territorial ambitions has taken an interest in a young woman with a contested inheritance that happens to border his eastern lands." She paused. "It's a compelling narrative." Seraphine felt the room shift. And she understood, with cold clarity, that this was the moment Ariadne had been building toward since she walked in. Not defense, counterattack, a political narrative that reframed everything. Roman as opportunist, Seraphine as instrument, the entire proceeding as a land grab wearing the costume of justice. It was good. She hated how good it was. "Aldrich," Seraphine said. "Miss Callaway." "The letters from the physician, the ones describing the dosage adjustments. Please read the third paragraph of the second letter aloud." A pause, paper moving. Aldrich read. His voice was steady, if slightly strained, and every word fell into the quiet of the room like a stone into still water. The specific clinical language of subject's tolerance, of timeline, of natural presentation upon conclusion. Words that meant, in plain language, that a young woman had been slowly killed in a house she believed was hers, by people she believed were her family. The room was very still when he finished. Ariadne said nothing. "Territorial ambition," Seraphine said quietly into the silence, "is a very interesting accusation to make from the position you're currently in." She paused. "The council has the documents. The witnesses are in custody. The authentication is complete." She tilted her head. "Whatever narrative you bring to the regional council, you'll be bringing it from a cell." She heard Aldrich stand. She heard the door open, more people entering. The specific sound of official movement, the kind that meant the procedural weight of institutions coming to bear. She heard Ariadne's breathing change. Just slightly, just once. And then the precise heels on the stone floor, no longer moving toward anything. Just standing. Contained. It was over in 20 minutes. Seraphine sat in the anteroom afterward, while the sounds of official process moved around her. Documents, signatures, formal language. Roman sat beside her. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then she said, "She almost had us, with the narrative." "Almost," he agreed. "She's intelligent," Seraphine said, not admiringly, just accurately. "Yes," Roman said, "she is." A pause. "Are you all right?" he asked. She thought about the question seriously. "I thought I'd feel something," she said. "When it was done, I thought there'd be—" She stopped. "Nothing came," she said quietly. "I just feel tired." Roman was quiet for a moment. "Then, that's not nothing. That's your body finally believing it's safe." She turned toward him, and for the first time since the carriage, since the rain, since all of it, she didn't have anything else to map. Nothing to plan, nothing to survive. Just the warmth in her chest, steady and patient. And his presence beside her, doing what it had done since the beginning. Waiting to be found. Chapter 8. They stayed in Mireth that night. Seraphine didn't argue about it. Her body had made the decision before her mind could weigh in. The exhaustion that settled over her in the anteroom had not lifted, had only deepened. The specific bone weight of someone who had been running on purpose and adrenaline for 3 days, and had finally run out of both. Hesta gave her the same room. It smelled of lavender and clean linen, and the cold stone she already knew, and she sat on the edge of the bed and pressed her hands flat on her knees and breathed. Done. The word kept arriving, and she kept not knowing what to do with it. She had spent so long, 8 months building the case, 4 years before that simply surviving, 21 years total learning to navigate a world that hadn't been designed with her in mind. That done had no texture she recognized. It was supposed to feel like something. Every story she'd ever had read to her, every account of justice arrived at and wrongs corrected, described a feeling at this moment. Relief. Triumph. The specific release of something long held. She felt tired. She felt the warmth in her chest, steady and unhurried. She felt, underneath both of those, something she didn't have a name for yet. Something that had been growing since the carriage, since Roman's arm in the rain, since the dream in the forest, and the morning tea, and him saying, "I'd like to know you're all right," in the voice of someone who meant it the way people rarely meant things. A knock at the door. "It's me," Roman said. Through the door, not opening it. Waiting. "Come in," she said. He came in and left the door slightly open. She noticed that, filed it. Not propriety exactly. Permission. The door left open was a choice that meant you control this space, not me. She'd noticed he did that. Created exits, created options, never positioned himself between her and the way out. He sat in the chair by the hearth, not on the bed, not close. "You should sleep," he said. "I know." She didn't move. "I can't stop thinking." "About what?" She was quiet for a moment. "My mother," she said. "The vein bloodline. Everything you told me this morning." She paused. "I've been blind since I was 7. I always believed it was an accident. A fever, nerve damage. The physician said at the time it was irreversible." She tilted her head. "But if I carry wolf blood, even diluted, it shouldn't have been permanent," Roman said quietly. She absorbed that. "You think someone made it permanent," she said. "I think it's worth examining." A pause. "I think there are people in my territories, healers, not physicians, something older, who could tell us more than the man who diagnosed you at 7 years old." He paused. "I'm not promising anything. I don't want to promise you something I can't." "Don't," she said. "Don't manage the expectation. Just tell me the truth." "The truth is, I don't know," he said. "But I think there's more to know than you've been told." She pressed the heel of her hand against her sternum. The pull was warm tonight, different from before, not urgent, not the insistent compass pull of the first morning, but something quieter. The difference between a river running fast and a river running deep. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said. "Yes." "You said you felt the bond in the carriage." She paused. "What did it feel like? For you?" A silence. Longer than his usual silences. "Like recognition," he said. "That's the only word I have for it. It wasn't romantic, not at first. It was more fundamental than that. Like hearing a piece of music you've never heard before, and knowing immediately that it's been missing from every room you've ever been in." She was very still. "That's a precise description," she said. "I've had 3 days to work on it." She almost smiled. "Almost. I haven't been good at trust," she said. "I want you to know that. Not as a warning exactly. More as context. 4 years in that house, with people who were careful and warm and consistent, right up until they weren't." She paused. "I'm going to be slow. About this. About whatever this is." "All right," he said. "That doesn't frustrate you?" "No. Simple. Certain. The bond doesn't have a deadline, Seraphine. It's not a contract with a signing window." A pause. "I've been alive for 31 years, 6 of those as Alpha King. I've learned the difference between things that are urgent and things that only feel urgent because we're afraid they'll disappear." He paused. "You won't disappear." She turned that over. "How do you know?" "Because you're the kind of person who packs documents and goes back into the house," he said quietly. "You don't disappear. You arrive." The fire spoke. A low, settling sound. The oak burning the way she'd known it from the first night. Slow and deliberate and comfortable. She stood up. He didn't move. She heard him stay very still, which she was learning was his version of giving her space. He went still the way other people stepped back. She crossed the room toward him. She found the arm of his chair with her fingertips, oriented herself, and sat on the edge of the hearth, close, not touching, the heat of the fire on her left side, and the warmth of his presence on her right. "Tell me something true," she said. "Something you haven't told anyone." A long pause. "Being Alpha King is the loneliest thing I've ever done," he said. "Not because there aren't people around me. There are always people around me." He paused. "Because every person in every room is either afraid of me, or wants something from me, or both. And I learned, about 3 years in, to perform the version of myself that those people need. The steady version, the certain version." He paused. "I've been performing it so long I sometimes can't find the edges of it anymore. Where the performance ends." She listened to this without interrupting. "You've never performed for me," she said. "No," he said. "I noticed that. I didn't decide it. It just didn't happen. From the first moment in the rain." A pause. "I think that might be part of what the bond knows that I hadn't admitted to myself yet." She was quiet. Then she reached out. Slowly, deliberately. Not searching, the way people assumed blind reaching was searching. She knew exactly where he was. She'd mapped him by sound and warmth and displacement, but intentionally, announcing her movement, giving him time to adjust or move away. He didn't move away. Her fingers found his hand. He turned his palm up immediately, not grasping, just opening, offering the contact back to her as a choice rather than a capture. She kept her hand there. The pull in her chest went quiet. Not gone, just settled. Like something that had been asking a question, finally receiving an answer it was willing to rest in. "I'm going to need to go north with you," she said, "to begin the estate process properly, to meet the healers you mentioned." She paused. "And to figure out what I am, apparently. Since that seems to be more complicated than I previously understood." "Yes," he said. "I'm not going as your mate," she said carefully. "Not yet. I'm going as myself, someone in process of figuring things out." "That's exactly how you should go," he said. "You're very agreeable for a king. You're very direct for someone who just survived a poisoning." She did smile then, a real one, unexpected, arriving before she could moderate it. "Fair," she said. She didn't move her hand. He didn't move his. The fire burned low and warm between them, and outside the winter dark pressed against the window, and somewhere north, 3 days away, a palace waited that she hadn't seen and couldn't imagine. She was not afraid of it. She was not afraid of much, she was realizing. She had been careful for so long, so precise, so controlled, that she'd mistaken caution for fear. But this, sitting here, hand in hand with a man who was apparently the most powerful wolf in 6 kingdoms, and who had described her presence as music that had been missing from every room, this didn't feel like caution failing. It felt like caution finally having something worth lowering for. "Roman," she said. "Yes. The wolf in the dream." She paused. "That was your other form." "Yes. Will you?" She stopped. Started again. "Someday. Not now. But someday. Will you let me?" "Yes," he said, before she finished. She absorbed that, kept her hand where it was, and let herself, very carefully, very deliberately, begin to trust the dark. She slept deeply that night. No dreams. Or, not no dreams, but the forest dream came quietly, briefly, just long enough for her to feel the undergrowth beneath her feet and the warmth of a large body nearby and a heartbeat she was beginning to know. This time she didn't reach out. She just stood and let herself be known. Outside Mirith, on the North Road, Roman's silver-haired man sat watch and felt the bond pulse from his lord. Steady, deep, the specific rhythm of someone who had finally, after 6 years, stopped bracing. He looked up at the winter stars and said nothing, because some things don't need words, they just need witness. Chapter 9. 3 days north. Seraphine learned Roman in the carriage the way she learned everything. Incrementally, precisely, building a picture from accumulated details rather than a single comprehensive view. She learned that he took his tea without anything in it, and held the cup in both hands the way she did. She learned that he read. She could hear the particular silence of someone whose attention had gone into a page, rather than simply away from conversation. She learned that he checked on his men at every stop, personally, not through intermediaries. and that they responded to him with the specific warmth of people who were not merely professionally loyal. She learned that he laughed rarely but completely. When it came, it was unguarded, the laugh of someone who hadn't performed it into something smaller. She was cataloging all of it. She was also, she knew, falling. She didn't use that word yet. She turned it over privately, examined its edges, kept it in the part of her mind she reserved for things not yet ready to be spoken. But it was there, the word and the thing it described, both growing in the space that 4 years of careful not trusting had kept empty. On the second day, he told her about the palace. Not grandly, just practically. The layout, the staff, the council that met weekly, the particular politics of six-packs with 6 histories, who had spent generations arguing before Roman's father unified them, and Roman inherited the result. He described it the way she described things to herself, precisely, spatially, with the details that would help her navigate, rather than the details meant to impress. She loved him for that, before she realized she was doing it. On the third morning, she woke to the carriage stopped. The quality of the air had changed overnight. Colder, cleaner, with the high-altitude bite of mountain country. She could hear wind moving differently than it had for 3 days, moving through something vast and open, rather than hedged by lowland forest. "We're close," Roman said, from across the carriage. And then everything happened at once. A sound, outside, sharp, wrong. The specific percussion of something moving fast toward the carriage. Not a person, not an animal she recognized. A projectile. Roman moved. She heard him lunge across the carriage, felt the displacement of air, felt his body come between her and the window, a half-second before the window exploded inward. Glass and cold air, and the acrid smell of something burning. An incendiary bolt. She'd read about them. Wolf country weapon, burns fast and hot. The carriage interior lit up in heat she could feel on her face and hands, and Roman was already pulling her toward the door, his arm around her, his body angled to keep himself between her and the fire. And outside there were voices, his men, the controlled, urgent voices of people trained for exactly this. And the carriage door opened from outside, and hands she didn't know helped her down, and Roman was beside her still, his hand at her back. "Move," he said, low and urgent, north, toward the tree line. She moved. She couldn't see the threat. She couldn't see anything, but she could hear the whistle of a second bolt passing somewhere to her right, the return fire from Roman's men, the specific sound of a man in his wolf form shifting mid-run, the deep bass of it, the rush of change. Someone hit her from the left. Not Roman. Wrong size, wrong smell, the sharp chemical smell of someone afraid and purposeful, and she went down hard on frozen ground, and the breath left her entirely. She rolled. She got her hands under her. She was on her feet before the person who'd hit her expected it. She heard their surprise in the adjustment of their weight, the fraction of hesitation, and she ran, not away, toward the sound of Roman's men, toward the north, toward the tree line he'd specified. A hand caught her arm. Roman. She knew immediately, the specific warmth, the smell of him, the way he pulled her without jerking, absorbing her momentum instead of fighting it. "Here," he said. "Stop." She stopped. They were in the trees. She could tell by the acoustic change, the way sound closed around them, the soft floor of pine needles underfoot. Behind them, the sounds of the ambush were resolving. She could hear it winding down. Fewer impacts. Roman's men taking control. "Are you hurt?" he said. "No. Are you?" He stopped. She heard something in the stop that she hadn't heard in his voice before. A catch. Something effortful about the breath that followed. "Roman." "It's fine," he said. "Roman." She found his arm, moved her hand up, found the source of the heat. His left side, high, below the shoulder, the specific wet warmth of something that wasn't sweat. "The bolt caught the edge," he said, "when I came across the carriage. It's not—" "Stop talking," she said. She pressed her hand against it. He made no sound. That frightened her more than sound would have. "How bad?" she said. "Manageable." "That's not what I asked." A pause. It clipped the shoulder and continued, he said. "The burn is secondary. The puncture is—" Another effortful breath. "Deeper than I'd prefer." She pressed harder, felt him tense, not pulling away, but the tension of someone absorbing pain rather than redirecting it. "The healers," she said. "How far?" "An hour." "Can you ride?" "Yes." "Then we're going now," she said. "Tell your men." He didn't argue. She felt him straighten, felt the effort it cost him, the controlled way he managed the movement, and he called out, low and clear, and his men responded. They rode. She sat beside him in a borrowed mount's saddle. She didn't ride alone in unfamiliar country. She'd made that assessment and acted on it without embarrassment, and she kept her hand pressed against his side, and felt his breathing, and counted it the way she counted everything that mattered. Steady, steady, steady. He was steady. But she had heard the catch in his voice. She had felt the wet warmth of it against her palm. And something was happening in her chest that was not the bond pull, or not only that, something older and more frightening, the specific sensation of caring about whether someone lived with an urgency that made the last 4 years of careful not trusting look like a rehearsal for this exact moment of understanding what was at stake. She pressed her hand harder against his side. "Stop that," he said. "Stop what?" "Whatever you're doing with your face." "I'm not doing anything with my face." "You're calculating whether I'm going to survive the next hour," he said. "I can hear it." "Can you?" "The quality of your silence changed," he said. "You went from processing to something else, something quieter. A breath. I'm going to be fine. You don't know that. I know my own body. You have a puncture wound from an incendiary bolt. I've had worse." She pressed her hand against his side and said nothing. He covered her hand with his. She went still. "Seraphine," his voice was low, still that effortful quality underneath it, the controlled management of pain, but beneath that something else, something that was working very hard to reach her through the management. "I need you to listen to me." "I'm listening." "The ambush was targeted," he said. "Someone knew our route. That means someone with access to my travel plans, someone inside my council possibly, or someone who intercepted the correspondence." A breath. "When we arrive, there will be an investigation. It may get complicated before it gets simple." He paused. "I need you to trust me through complicated." "I do trust you," she said, and it was only in saying it that she understood how completely it was true. "I know," he said. "I need you to keep trusting me, even when what I do next doesn't look the way you expect." She filed that. "What are you going to do next?" she said carefully. "Find out who sent those men," he said, "and make sure they understand the specific consequences of targeting someone under my protection." She was quiet. "Roman." "Yes." She pulled his hand tighter over hers, both of their hands now pressed against his wound, her palm and his covering it. "I'm not just under your protection," she said. "I want you to know that I know the difference between being protected and—" She stopped, found the word. "And this, whatever this is." A long pause. "What is this?" he said, quietly. She turned the word over one more time, let herself use it. "Chosen," she said. "I think this is chosen." His hand tightened over hers. The horses moved north. And ahead, through the cold mountain air, she could smell wood smoke and stone, and something ancient, a place that had been standing long enough to have weight, to push back against the wind, to hold warmth the way only very old buildings could. The palace. She was going to need to learn it. She was going to need to map every room, every corridor, every acoustic peculiarity of a building she'd never been in, that was apparently going to be home. The word arrived without drama, just settled, like the bond pull, like Roman's hand over hers, like the particular quality of a door, opening. They reached the palace as the sun set, a sun she couldn't see but felt on her left cheek, warm and lowering, the specific temperature of late afternoon light in high country. Roman was helped down by his men. She heard him redirect the help twice, insisting on more than he should have, being overruled by someone she was already beginning to think of as the silver-haired man who would become important. Seraphine stood in the courtyard and listened to the palace introduce itself. Stone, wind, fire somewhere inside. Many people, many footsteps. the organized hum of a large household that ran whether or not its lord was present. And then a voice, somewhere above her on steps she hadn't yet counted. "Welcome home, Your Majesty." Not said to Roman. Said to her. She tilted her face toward it, and felt something in her chest that was not the bond, and not the warmth, and not anything she had a word for. Just the absolute, terrifying, wonderful certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Chapter 10. The healers worked through the night. Seraphine sat outside the chamber door and counted things. Footsteps passing. The particular frequency of the stone floor under different weights. She was already building the palace's map, corridor by corridor, the way she built every new space, refusing to be lost in it. The sound of wind against northern-facing windows, the specific acoustic signature of a building this old, this large, the way it breathed differently from anything she'd known. She counted Roman's healers going in and out. 3 of them, the oldest one. She could tell by the deliberate economy of her movement, the way old expertise moved without wasting, spoke rarely and only in low tones to the others. The second was younger, efficient, precise. The third was barely more than an apprentice, and Seraphine could track her anxiety and her breathing. She tracked all of it, because tracking was what she had instead of seeing the thing she needed to see. The silver-haired man, she'd learned his name was Calder, sat near her, not close, not intrusively, just present, in the way Roman was present. The way she was beginning to understand was a quality the people around Roman shared, the ability to be in a space without colonizing it. "How long has he been your king?" she asked. 6 years, Calder said, "since his father died." "And before that?" "His father's most trusted soldier." A pause. Then his. She nodded. "The ambush," she said. "Do you know who sent them?" A careful silence. "We have a suspicion," Calder said. "A council member who has been resistant to certain recent developments. The Alpha King's travel plans were shared with the full council before departure." He paused. "The investigation will be thorough." "Recent developments," she said. "Meaning me." "Meaning the bond, yes." He paused again. "There are those who had arrangements in mind for the Alpha King's future mate. Political arrangements. A bond that forms outside those arrangements is inconvenient to specific people." She absorbed this. Tried to be inconvenient, she thought. Couldn't even manage it correctly. "He'll be all right," Calder said. Not reassurance. He said it the way Roman said things, as information rather than comfort. The bolt clipped the muscle, and the burn is surface. He's lost blood, but his healing rate is exceptional. By morning. "I know," she said. She did know. She'd been calculating it, wolf healing, the specific information she carried from years of reading, cross-referenced against what she'd felt under her hand on the ride north. She knew he would be all right. Knowing and feeling were, she was learning, entirely different countries. The oldest healer came out near midnight. "He's asking for you," she said. Seraphine stood. The healer, her name was Marin, Seraphine had learned, put a hand briefly on her arm. Not guiding, just contact. "He fought us on resting," Marin said, dryly. "Kept trying to get up. Settled down about an hour ago." A pause. "I suspect he'll try again the moment you're in the room." "I'll manage him," Seraphine said. Marin made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but in the same family. Seraphine went in. The chamber was warm, fire high, the smell of the healing herbs Marin used still present in the air, sharp and green and specific. She mapped it in the first 10 steps. Large room, bed against the north wall, chair to the left of the bed, window to the right. She found the chair. She found Roman by sound, his breathing, which she knew now, which she had spent 3 days learning, and could pick out of a crowded room. Slower than usual, managed, but present. "I'm here," she said. She sat. "I know," he said. His voice was rougher than usual, tired in a way she hadn't heard it be tired. "I could hear you outside the door for 3 hours. You were supposed to be unconscious." "I was resting," he said. "There's a difference." Marin would disagree. Marin disagrees with everything I do on principle. She delivered me. She's never forgiven me for being a difficult birth. Seraphine pressed her lips together, kept her face composed. Lie still, she said. I am lying still. You're thinking about sitting up. A pause. I was thinking about it, he admitted. Don't. Silence. Then, you're very comfortable giving orders. I'm very comfortable being right, she said. Those things often produce the same behavior. He laughed. It cost him something. She heard it. The breath that followed the laugh, the careful management. But it was real, unguarded. The laugh she'd been cataloging since she first heard it 2 days ago. She reached out and found his hand. He turned his palm up immediately, the way he always did. I was frightened, she said, quietly, without performance. I know. Not of losing the bond, she said. Not of what it would mean, strategically or practically, or I was frightened of losing you. The specific person, the man who sat across from me in a carriage and didn't fill the silence. She paused. I need you to know the difference. His hand tightened on hers. Seraphine, he said. I'm not finished. All right, she breathed. I've been calling what I feel wrong things since the carriage, she said. Adrenaline, gratitude, proximity, the bond. She paused. But sitting outside that door tonight, counting your healer's footsteps, tracking the shift in her pace when the worst of it was resolved, that wasn't the bond. Or it wasn't only the bond. She stopped. I love you. I know it's fast. I know I'm 21, and I've known you for 4 days, and there is a list of rational objections as long as this room. I know all of that. Silence. I love you, she said again. And I needed to say it while you were alive and could hear it. I wasn't going to be the person who waited. The silence stretched, long enough that she almost filled it. Then Roman said, with a voice that was doing several things at once and managing none of them. I have been alive for 31 years, he said. I have been king for 6. I have sat in rooms with every kind of power and every kind of person, and I have performed the steady version of myself for so long that I genuinely wasn't certain the other version still existed. She waited. You found it in a carriage in the rain in the dark, he said. In approximately 40 minutes. A pause. I loved you before Marith. I think I loved you in the carriage, which is insane. And I knew it was insane, and the bond doesn't care about insane. He paused. I love you, with the full unperformed version of myself, whatever that costs. She tightened her hand on his, felt the pull in her chest go completely, finally, beautifully quiet. Not gone. Home. The bond, she said, completing it. She paused. What does that require? A careful breath. A claim, he said. Mine on you, and yours on me. Spoken and a bite. At the bond point. He paused. At the pace you're comfortable with. On a timeline you set. Where is the bond point? Left side of the throat, for humans. For wolves. Show me, she said. Silence. Seraphine. I'm not doing it tonight, she said. You're bleeding, and Marin would actually kill me. I just want to know. He guided her free hand, slowly, giving her every step of the movement, to a point below his left jaw, where the throat met the shoulder. Warm skin. His pulse beneath her fingertips, steady and real and present. She pressed her palm there, felt his pulse. Let herself feel it for a long moment, the specific, irreplaceable fact of him alive and present and here. Tomorrow, she said, when Marin says you can sit up. Tomorrow, he agreed. She didn't move her hand. He didn't move his. She must have slept in the chair. She woke to warmth on her left cheek. Sun, real sun, pressing through the north window with the specific quality of high-altitude morning, clean and cold and direct. She was still holding his hand. It's sunrise, Roman said. His voice was stronger, the roughness smoothed by sleep and wolf healing in time. I know, she said. I can feel it. There's gold in it, he said. The way it comes in, up here, this time of year, it comes through the window and goes gold before it's fully up, like the mountain catches it, before the valley does. She turned her face toward it, felt it on her skin. Tell me more, she said. He did. He described the sunrise in the specific, spatial, sensory way that she'd learned was how he gave her things, not performing the description, not compensating, just translating the world through his eyes into the texture and warmth and direction that her world ran on. She listened. And somewhere in the listening, in the gold light she couldn't see but could feel, in his voice finding its full strength again, in the palace breathing around her with its old stone and its high wind, and the distant organized sounds of a household waking, she understood what her mother had meant. You are more than what they see, my love. You always were. Not comfort. A promise. A promise that the right person would see past the blindness to the woman who mapped carriages in 30 seconds, who packed go-bags before she consciously admitted she needed them, who built legal cases in secret for 8 months and walked back into the house anyway, who ran barefoot into the rain and straight into the rest of her life. The right person would see all of that and call it, simply and completely, his mate. Marin said he could sit up by mid-morning. Seraphine stood at the window and felt the sun move. She'd always been able to track it this way, the warmth shifting across her face as the morning progressed, the world's slowest clock. Roman sat up. She heard him and turned. "Ready?" he said, not asking if she was sure. He'd learned her well enough not to ask if she was sure. Just, ready. "Yes," she said. She crossed to him. He spoke the claim first, low, formal, in the old Highland tongue that she didn't speak but whose rhythm and weight she felt in her chest like a second heartbeat. When he finished, he looked at her. She could feel him looking, the specific quality of his attention, the full unperformed version of it. She spoke. She didn't know the old words. She said it in her own language, in her own voice, in the direct, unmoderated way she did everything. "I claim you. All the unperformed parts. Everything you've been holding at a controlled temperature. I claim the man in the carriage, and the man in the dream, and the man who described the sunrise to me this morning so I could feel it. I claim you. You're mine." Silence. Then his hands, both of them, warm and steady, came up to frame her face. Asking. She turned her face into his hands. "Yes," she said. He pressed his lips to the bond point on her throat. The warmth in her chest, the pull, the compass, the thing she'd been calling wrong names since the carriage, ignited. Not painfully. Like a fire that had been burning low for days, finally being given the fuel it had been waiting for. Gold light through her skin. His pulse against her palm. Her name in his voice. Afterward, just once, like he was learning the weight of it now that it meant something different. Seraphine. They told her, later, that the bond completion showed visually, a flash of light at the bond point, brief and specific, that the wolves in the corridor outside felt as a pulse through the pack connection. Calder, standing watch, pressed the communication stone once. Then twice. In the capital, in the regional council building, in the room where Ariadne's legal proceedings were being formally prepared, someone felt the pulse and understood what it meant. The Alpha King had completed his bond. Which meant the woman beside him was queen. Which meant the Calloway estate, the suppressed will, the physician's letters, the backdated documents, all of it now had the full weight of the Highland throne behind it. Ariadne, when she was told, said nothing. She sat in the official holding room with her precise heels and her controlled warmth and her political narratives, and she said absolutely nothing. Because there was, finally, nothing left to say. Seraphine stood at the north window of the palace and felt the sun move across her face. Behind her, Roman was being redirected back to bed by Marin, who had strong opinions about bond completions happening before adequate rest and was not moderating them. Seraphine listened to him argue, listened to Marin win, smiled. She was blind, and she was bonded, and she was apparently a queen, and somewhere in the world her father's will was being registered correctly, and the people who had called her manageable were learning what that word actually cost. And the sun was on her face, and Roman's voice was in the room. And she was, for the first time in 21 years, completely, entirely, irreversibly, home. Creator's outro. And that, friends, is the story of a blind girl who ran into the dark, and found that the dark had been waiting to give her everything the light had taken. Seraphine didn't need sight to see what mattered. She needed silence, and patience, and the specific courage of someone who has been underestimated so thoroughly that they stopped performing smallness and started becoming something worth reckoning with. Roman didn't need a queen who completed him. He needed someone who found the unperformed version of him and refused to let it go back into hiding. They needed each other, the way people need things that bypass sense entirely and go straight to the oldest part of the architecture. Thank you, genuinely, from the place where these stories actually come from, for spending this time in the dark with me. Now I need to ask you something, and I want you to actually answer in the comments, because this one kept me up. Was Bastian guilty? He knew. He stayed. He asked her if she was happy and then went back to bed. Yes, he turned at the end, but he turned when the walls were already closing, when cooperation was the only remaining option. Is that redemption? Or is it just survival wearing redemption's coat? Tell me below. And if you want to hear what happens when the regional council tries to challenge Seraphine's claim to the Highland throne, when they discover that the blind girl they never bothered to look at directly has memorized every legal precedent in 6 territories, you know where to find me.